I'm not entirely sure if I've talked about this before, but it should be said that nostalgia is a really powerful feeling. It causes people to become overly attached to something against their better judgment. Regardless if it's good or bad, nostalgia overtakes us with reminders of a simpler time in our lives, when the world felt simpler and less complicated, making us want to escape back into the innocence of childhood and keep our minds off the struggles of adulthood. It's almost like going back in time in some way, where our brains are capable of recollecting and saving information from decades ago. In a way, it's a really fascinating thing to ponder about, in spite of the setbacks that come with it. It can be a great feeling, but it can also be bittersweet. When you have a certain feeling that something in your life is missing. It was there for so long, and then all of a sudden, it's just gone. And I can't believe I'm about to say this, but this is how I feel about Ash Ketchum in the Pokemon anime. For those who may not know, I made some statements in the past speaking of my disapproval of the show. One in particular being a video I made several years ago following his loss in the Kalos League. There's things in the video I said that I still stand by, but it definitely comes across as stated, as there are several things that were not worded properly. I never really thought of it as one of my better videos. It was just something I put together as soon as I saw Ash losing the Kalos League. With that said, my relationship with the show is still complicated, if that's the right word to use. The majority of the series is really dated. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. It had a really repetitive formula where everything was constantly being reset back to the status quo. There's a ton of ass-pulls and things that make no sense or didn't properly connect with the games. The writers kept coming up with horrible reasons for Ash losing a league that he clearly should have won, with the only one not being total bullshit being his loss at the Hoenn League. A lot of the characters were one-note and generic and lacking interesting personality. The stories were badly paced as a result of the unbelievable abundance of filler episodes. A lot of the episodes served no purpose except to advertise something from the current-gen game without doing anything to further the story. It constantly ran on the unbelievable plot point that the characters never age over the course of the show's 25-year run, making it feel like a zombie of itself like The Simpsons or Family Guy. There's almost no real character growth or development for the main character because the writers need to abuse the reset button and just have him go right back to where he started, to the point that the one-shot characters had more development and a more focused character arc than Ash over the course of 25 years. It's not that the show was horrible or even that bad, but it's still really dull. And for the longest time, people just wanted Ash's story to have a proper end instead of being needlessly dragged out. Let him win, let him become a Pokemon master. Let him achieve something so we can focus on a new character. It seemed like something that was never going to happen with how set the staff was on keeping Ash a 10-year-old kid forever and using him as a mascot for the series. That is until it was announced in December 2022 that after 25 years, Ash Ketchum's story was finally coming to an end. Even now, I'm still having a hard time processing it. It feels surreal that this is actually happening. I never thought it'd be possible, and yet here we are. The final episode of Ash Ketchum's story. Honestly, I can't help but feel puzzled about it. I spent so long wanting the show to end that I never planned on how I would react or how I would feel about it in the event that it actually does end. And now it comes across as a bittersweet victory. This is what I wanted after all, so why isn't it fully satisfying? Is it possible that even after all this time I still have some sort of attachment to this character? And this is where the nostalgia kicks in. I've never really talked about it before, but in spite of my occasional jabs at the Pokemon anime, it was my first major exposure to pop culture. Pokemon was my first real obsession, before things like The Simpsons, SpongeBob SquarePants, My Little Pony, and even Kingdom Hearts. It was the first piece of media that I developed a real connection with, and in some ways it helped shape who I became as a person, someone with a love for stories that take place in a fantasy world. Adventures about traveling across far-off places, striving towards meeting a goal, something that gives our life purpose and meaning, forming bonds with different people from different walks of life, discovering new things about the world we live in, following our dreams no matter how unrealistic they may seem. It's a magical feeling that captivates us when we're young and naive, resulting in us making attachments to things within a fictional world. And this was something that, as a kid, I felt was perfectly embodied by the adventures of Ash Ketchum, a boy who left his hometown to follow his dream of becoming a Pokemon master. I was actually there since the very beginning, from the moment that promotional VHS of the show was released, and I was one of the lucky few to own a copy of that special VHS. And soon after, I was pretty much part of the ride for as long as I can remember. I was there for almost every single episode of the show, whether it was broadcasted on Kids WB or Cartoon Network. I was there when the movies came out, and I would ask my parents over and over until they took me to see them. Whenever I played the games, I would base my team on Ash's Pokemon for each region. I collected the VHSs, the DVDs, collected the plushies and toys, and at the peak of YouTube, I was watching the Japanese dub straight from Japan. I'd even go so far as to say there were moments in the show that made me cry. Ash releasing Butterfree, Ash deciding to leave Pikachu with his own kind before Pikachu chose to stay with him, Ash's death in the first movie, Celebi's death in the fourth movie, Jessie, James, and Meowth releasing Arbok and Weezing, or Ash parting ways with Brock and Misty. There were moments in the show that filled me with joy, like seeing Ash winning his matches during each league, Ash getting a new Pokemon, Ash defeating his rivals after struggling with them throughout the region, Team Rocket being the best characters in the show. There was actually a lot of things in the show that I liked. I practically made it an unbreakable tradition to watch each new episode on Saturday mornings, and to see episodes of Pokemon playing on TV after school. The Pokemon anime was something that I was incredibly obsessed with, but then all of a sudden that obsession just stopped. Completely. I found myself less interested in keeping up with the story or religiously watching every episode and movie, mostly at some point during the Diamond and Pearl saga, which dragged on for way longer than it had to. Then came the Unova saga, where the show really took a nosedive in quality. And then came the Kalos League, where after Ash lost that one, I just stopped keeping up with the show entirely. This is when I was well into my adult years and had to grow out of some things I watched as a kid, developing new interests, finding new things to enjoy, focusing on other aspects of my life. And somewhere in the middle of that, I guess my Pokemon obsession just progressively slipped away. Around the peak of my disinterest, I was wondering what could have caused something that played such a huge role in my life suddenly no longer seem like a big deal. And after going over it, I figured out the elements that made me lose interest in Pokemon: tedium and repetitivity. Much like The Simpsons, SpongeBob SquarePants, and Family Guy, there comes a time when a story feels like it's been going on way too long, especially if it's a weekly television show. By the time I lost most of my interest in Pokemon, it was already on for over 20 years, and yet it was still going. Still focusing on Ash Ketchum trying to become a Pokemon master almost as if he hadn't accomplished anything since 1997. A show can only go on for so long before you inevitably lose interest in it, and I guess that's what happened with me and Pokemon. But aside from going on for so long, I came to realize how incessant it was in its dull formula and constantly resetting everything back to the status quo. And after seeing them do the exact same thing over and over for so long, it just got so boring. At this point, it was made clear that the company just wanted to keep Ash around because they wanted to keep the Pokemon brand marketable, not because they actually care about giving people a compelling protagonist who actually makes progress and gets closer to reaching his goal. Around the time Ash was going through Kalos, I had already gotten into a variety of other shows, each with a much better sense of writing and progress than Pokemon, and then I thought to myself, why invest any more of my time in this one show that's clearly run out of steam when I could be investing time in stuff that's much more interesting and relatable? And it's here where the main difference between my experience with Pokemon as a kid and watching it as an adult really started to kick in. Because when you're a kid, you don't really have the ability to look at something with a critical lens. Your brain hasn't developed to the point where you can really think or process the content you're watching. As a kid, Pokemon was just this piece of escapism where I could live out certain fantasies and adventures in my head by just seeing it happen to fictional characters on screen. That or trying to take my mind off things that were causing me stress like school or other things. Granted, I was able to find myself empathizing with these characters, but there was really nothing I could do except react to what I was seeing. It was back when I had a simple and innocent yet naive view of media. I just wanted to have fun and not really think about it. But around the peak of YouTube, when people were getting into analysis culture and media critique, I admit I started adopting new ideas on how to view something, and how I would think about the stuff I watched or interacted with. And I guess that sort of had an effect on my relationship with Pokemon. I do still have fond memories of watching it as a kid, as they are happy memories, but it was just something I grew out of and had to move on from. It just felt like there was no point in sticking around if I wasn't getting any satisfying payoff for the time I was putting in this show. I would go on to comment on the show a few more times, such as in my review of Trump Guy, where I talk about the importance of not letting something go on for too long and giving it a satisfying conclusion. But little did I know that in a few years' time, I was going to get just what I wished for. It was only recently when the story of Ash Ketchum aired its final episode in Japan. But now that it's actually over, and after seeing the community's widespread reaction to it, I can't help but feel like there's something missing in my life. But why? This is pretty much what I was asking for the Pokemon anime to give Ash a satisfying conclusion and to let him retire as the protagonist. I mean, they actually allowed him to win. He finally obtained a major victory by becoming a Pokemon champion. It's a sensible time for his story to come to an end because there's really nothing else they can do with him at this point. And yet somehow I felt that wave of nostalgia hitting me when I first heard the news that his story was ending. It even compelled me to start faving a bunch of Ash Ketchum related Pokemon fan art on DeviantArt. I started reliving all those memories I had watching Ash's story unfold in my mind. All the highs, all the lows, all the victories and failures, all the friends and companions he made. This kid is only 10 years old and he's strangely enough accomplished more than most people could ever hope to in their lives. And in the end, he finally came out on top. Knowing that he's achieved his goal after working towards it for so long is really uplifting to hear about. I actually felt happy for Ash and felt like congratulating him. All those childhood memories, all that time I invested in the Pokemon anime, it was finally given a satisfying payoff. Ash achieved his goal. He became a Pokemon master. And as happy as I am to see him win, I'm also feeling just as bittersweet and kind of sad about seeing him go. And I'm not alone in feeling this way. There's been a large, sweeping, and highly vocal declaration of how sad people are to see Ash go. So many people, from those who were there from the beginning to those who joined a couple of years ago. The internet is flooded with people saying goodbye to Ash and feeling the nostalgia that came to us as his tale was done. And after seeing so many different people coming together to bid him farewell, it helped me to understand why I felt the way I did. A clear explanation for this bittersweet feeling I had about Ash's story ending. For the longest time, as long as I can remember being sentient, Ash Ketchum was the oldest constant in my entire life. Pokemon was the first real obsession I had as a kid, and Ash Ketchum was my introduction to Pokemon. So much so that I spent hours and hours building up all of my Pokemon teams to be like his while playing the games. I even think of Pikachu as my main fighter over Sora in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. That's how much of an impact Pokemon had on me. And it was all thanks in part to this one kid. I recently watched a video uploaded by Solid J entitled Ash Says Goodbye. And while he's well known for his parody and satire, this particular video hit very differently. It actually took the time to be serious and address how so many people felt about the idea of Ash departing from the show. And this one line from Professor Oak perfectly says it all.
I don't know what to tell you, Ash, alright? I mean, I'm disappointed just as you are. But what are you gonna do? It's over. This is the end. There's nowhere to go from here. I think it's a beautiful thing, Ash. Now you have the time to reflect. Appreciate the life that you've lived. You've touched so many lives. All with just your one.
It's true. Ash did touch a lot of lives with his own. He touched entire generations of people around the world. From the kids of the 90s to the current era, Ash was a defining element that personified everyone's childhood. And it can also apply to the show itself, as Ash came across so many different characters and made a difference in their lives. From his friends, to his rivals, to his Pokemon, to the legendary Pokemon, to the one-shot characters he'd come across. Ash has had such a huge impact on the world of Pokemon that even he might not fully grasp. This makes me realize how much of a big hit it is knowing that Ash isn't going to be there anymore. He was always there doing his thing, and now he's just gone. It's something that gives me goosebumps and makes me feel sort of existential. I'll admit, waking up early on Saturday mornings to see what was next for Ash and seeing where his adventure would take him next was a real thrill as a kid. Collecting the toys, reading the books, watching the movies in theaters, building my Pokemon teams in the games after him, it was the earliest memories of childhood I can think of. In spite of my criticisms of the show, the fact is, I grew up with Ash. He was literally a part of my life for 25 years, and now that he's being retired, it feels somber. I crapped on him often in the past, and yet I'm really gonna miss him. It makes me reflect on how much we grew up with Ash over the years, and how we were part of his journey all along. The story of an adventurous kid who got to explore the world, meet new people, and see wonders that he could only dream of. Getting to look out at the stars every night, and waking up to a bright day as he approached his destination. We've all dreamed of having that sort of freedom in our lives, and Ash got to experience all of it. And we got to join him in all those experiences, sharing in all the great things that can be found in the world of Pokemon. We all dream of leaving home and traveling the world, and by watching over Ash as long as we did, we got a pretty good idea of what that dream is like. But I think the most important thing about the ending of Pokemon and how it ended with Ash becoming a champion is what it means for his character after all the years he spent struggling for that victory. In spite of the many times he would fail, he'd always get back up and try again. He never gave up and kept pushing himself forward. We all thought that Ash would never win something this big, but after such a long time, having him win sends another important message. No matter how long it takes, no matter how many setbacks and defeats you find, if you keep trying and learning, you'll eventually reach your goal. He finally achieved his dream that he worked so hard for without letting his failures discourage him. It's a happy ending for his character, and it also teaches a valuable lesson to the audience, to just keep working hard and do your best, because eventually it'll be worth it. I guess it goes to show that there's more than one way of growing up outside of aging. He grew up through his experience and progress as a trainer. He started as an ignorant rookie, and now he's a champion. If you traveled back in time to about 5 to 10 years ago and said that Ash would become a Pokemon master, I would have laughed in your face. That's how surreal it is that Ash actually made it. I hated how Ash was never allowed to grow or mature or get closer to his goal. It just became so redundant seeing him do the exact same thing over and over for years while never actually getting anywhere. but I still can't deny he was literally my entry into an entire franchise. And with the games getting worse, he was literally my last attachment to the series. Ash Ketchum was a significant part of my life. I spent my entire childhood and some of my adult years growing up with this kid, so now that he's leaving, it actually hits me a lot different than I thought it would. This isn't the end of Pokemon. It's making way too much money for Nintendo to drop it. But this is the end of Ash Ketchum, and after everything he's been through, he's earned a good rest. I'm honestly kinda shaking my head at how foolish I was back then, acting all cynical towards Ash and convincing myself he'd always be a loser. Because now, I see him as a winner, an inspiration, and an amazing role model for people to take after. And in a way, I suppose that's the legacy of Ash Ketchum. A cartoon character who can live on in the hearts of millions of people around the world after all these years. How he manages to stick with you even after you stopped watching the show for so long. And I think that's what the final 11 episodes represents. A celebration of Ash's journey and how he stuck around as long as he did. And the impact he had on so many lives. It still feels so unreal to me. I still remember being in school speeding through my homework so I can watch more Pokemon episodes. It was something that I loved for so long. Ash and Pikachu was literally the first thing you think about when Pokemon comes to mind. And now that they're gone, it's gonna feel so weird. I don't even remember the last time I even watched the show. But it's still so crazy that we even got to this point. For those who don't know, the original writer of the show, Takashi Shudo, died before he can see the end of the anime. He originally wanted to end Ash's story around when Gen 3 was coming out and start with a new character, but they didn't let him because they wanted to keep telling this story. He quit around the third movie but was never able to truly let go of the franchise. I think now he can finally rest in peace knowing that they actually cared to move on from Ash's story. Even if this is the end, it won't take away from the impact Ash had. All the fun memories of playing the games and watching the anime will always be with me. And that means a great deal to me that I can never fully describe with words. In the end, Ash taught us one of the most important lessons of all. Anyone can go on their own personal adventure, to experience great things and meet people and explore the world. It's just a matter of taking those first steps. And it wasn't just told to us, it was shown to us. Through Ash Ketchum's 25-year-long journey. It might not be enough to fully reignite my dedication to Pokemon, but I still have to commemorate what Ash achieved. It actually makes me feel proud of the time I spent with him, and to think that there's millions around the world sharing in that pride with me is definitely a legacy worth celebrating. So long, Ash Ketchum. You kept going the distance and reached your goal. You actually made it, fulfilling your dream of becoming a Pokemon master, and that's something I can deeply respect. This may be the end of your story, but the effect you made will last forever. Thanks for checking out my review. If you liked what you saw here and would like to support me, check out my Patreon in the description. Every little bit helps and I always appreciate those who support my work. Until next time, stay cool.